Hi everyone, welcome to TrainHR's live webinar on legal issues concerning employees with psychiatric illness under the ADA and more. My name is Liz and I'm going to be your host today. On behalf of TrainHR team, I would like to thank you for being part of this event. Today's webinar will be presented by Susan Sehe-Desmond. Susan is a shareholder with the firm of Jackson Lewis LLP, which has offices in 59 cities across the country. She has been representing management in the area of labor and employment law since her graduation from the University of Tennessee School of Law. Susan is a frequent speaker and author of a number of labor and employment issues. She's named in the Best Lawyers in America and has been named by Chambers USA as one of the America's leading business lawyer for labor and employment law. We are honored to have such a distinguished person such as Susan with us to present this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, I would like to inform you of the program outline for this training session. This webinar is for 90-minute duration. First, Susan will take you through today's webinar, highlighting the area that will be covered, and then she will share with you her presentation. I would also like to inform you that all participants, once they are part of this teleconference, they have been placed on mute and will remain so until the Q&A begins towards the end of the webinar. This is for the purpose of avoiding any kind of discontinuity and for allowing the presenter to speak clearly, so that everyone who is present in this webinar can take maximum benefit from the session. I also request all to hold back your question until the Q&A window begins. 10 minutes of time will be allotted for the Q&A, during which your questions will be answered. And if for any reason you get logged out of this training session or teleconference, I request you all to follow the same procedure to join in again. Now that we are all ready to start, I request Susan to take it from here. Susan.
Thank you, Liz. For the next 90 minutes or so, we are going to be talking about a very prevalent problem in our society, and that is dealing with mental illness. I think we have become much more acute as to the problems of mental illness, and certainly are becoming much more aware that mental illness is not uncommon, if you will, and it is something that we are having to deal with on a day-to-day basis, both in our families and in the workplace. And so we are going to be talking about them rather significantly, and as Liz said, I will leave about 10 minutes at the end of the session for any questions that you may have that I don't cover or I didn't cover in as much detail as you would have liked. Let's just start talking about the most commonly diagnosed mental disorders, and there's a lot of them out there, and certainly I cannot in 90 minutes or so cover every single mental disorder that you may come across in the workplace, but these are the most commonly diagnosed mental disorders that you see on your screen here. I think we hear a lot about mood disorders, major depressive disorder, dysthymia, and bipolar disorder, with the major depressive disorder and bipolar probably being the most common that we hear in the workplace and even in the media. When we talk about major depressive disorder, we're usually talking about someone who has significant periods of time when they are extremely depressed, frequently suicidal, and the like. But the bipolar disorder is usually someone who has extreme highs and extreme lows. What's interesting with your individuals who have bipolar disorder is because usually when they are in their extreme highs, they tend to be a very productive employee for your organization, and they tend to be very, very creative. But on the other hand, when they hit their lows, these are the times that they sometimes have difficulty even functioning on a day-to-day basis. They have difficulty getting out of bed, and you start to see performance issues, and of course even an increase in absenteeism and the like, because they are having such a difficult time even getting to work. We also have the personality disorders, and these aren't just disorders that, we can't just get along, but we have the antisocial personality disorder, avoidant personality disorder, and a borderline personality disorder. I think the most common that I see frequently in the workplace is the borderline personality disorder, which is sometimes confused with bipolar disorder. Someone who has borderline personality disorder does have some highs and lows, just like a bipolar disorder does, but individuals with a borderline personality disorder tend to engage in very impulsive behavior during certain times when they are in their mood, if you will, of engaging in this impulsive behavior. They may even do things like be promiscuous. They may steal from your organization because that's something very impulsive, even if they don't need the money. Probably one of the most common or one of the most high-profiled individual who was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder was Winona Ryder during the shoplifting episode, because that was an impulsive behavior that she was unable to control, and it, as a result of a borderline personality disorder. So when we have individuals with this particular disorder, they tend to be the ones who really act out and do things that you may think that's not within their personality. You'll think, oh wow, they're very a good worker. They're very they're cute about or a very responsible person and the like. But then they will engage in this impulsive behavior. We also have the eating disorders, anorexia and bulimia being the most common that we see. But we also have the binge eating disorder, which I think sometimes we don't hear enough about, but this does people with binge eating. You have binge eating that can lead to anorexia and bulimia. You even have the binge eating that could lead to obesity and morbid obesity in the workplace. Individuals with anorexia tend to try to starve themselves, as we now know, and as a result, they tend to be extremely underweight and have even physical problems that are associated with their failure to eat properly. Individuals with bulimia tend to have both bouts of anorexia and bulimia. What bulimics tend to do is they binge and purge, if you will. They try to starve themselves, they try to be anorexic, but they are unable to do so, and then they will binge eat, and then they will feel so guilty about the binge eating that they will engage in purging behavior, such as trying to vomit their food or excessive use of laxatives. When we talk about mood disorders, the major depressive disorder that I was talking about earlier, it is considered the leading cause of disability for individuals who are ages 15 to 44. What is interesting about major depressive disorder is it tends to become noticeable in individuals' teens, and usually once individuals hit age 30 or 40, usually they've already been diagnosed with it, or they are undiagnosed with it and they have started to engage in behavior or self-medication, if you will, because they have not gotten the treatment they need for their disorder. It tends to be more prevalent in women than in men, although, as I said, men are certainly not immune to the disorder. This dysthymia that I was talking about earlier is also a prolonged chronic depression. They're not as severe as major depressive disorders because they have periods of depression and can be chronic, but they don't have this really, really low that we tend to see in the major depressive disorder, and that does affect about 3 million in the U.S. And, of course, the bipolar, as I said, we have those major shifts in their moods, and that does affect about 6 million individuals in the U.S. We go to the personality disorders. The antisocial personality disorder is, it's not that common in the U.S. We have about 1% in the U.S. And these individuals are unable to distinguish between right and wrong. They are just unwilling to follow the rules, if you will. And of course, in a workplace, that can be a very difficult person to deal with. The avoidant personality disorder affects about 5% of the individuals in the U.S. and usually is someone who's shy, doesn't want to socialize with others, and they're very, very sensitive to criticism. And, of course, in the workplace, that can be very difficult when you're trying to deal with someone's performance and you're trying to give them constructive criticism. they're going to have a difficult time taking that constructive criticism from you because of their disorder. The borderline personality disorder, as I've already talked about, it's also not as common in the U.S., obviously, as some of the mood disorders, but it does, entail someone who's very, very impulsive in nature and doing things that you would think were probably out of character during their periods when the borderline personality disorder is affecting them most significantly. We get into the eating disorders. Women are 3 times more likely than men to develop some of these eating disorders. They're more likely than men to develop binge eating disorders, 75% more likely. I've already kind of talked about what the characteristics of these disorders, but we obviously know that because of the individuals are not eating healthy, they impact the workplace too because they become cranky and irritable because they are not feeding themselves properly, and they also tend to have physical problems that can impact what you would pay under your group health plan because of these eating disorders. There are the various laws that do protect those with mental disorders that I will be talking about rather extensively today. The 3 that I will be talking about most extensively is the Family and Medical Leave Act and the